when their family dog disappeared and they suspected their neighbor had taken him. That is when they decided to attempt to murder the neighbor. But thankfully they failed. After their failed murder attempt, they began to worry that the police might one day catch on and take all their kids into foster care. So they decided the only solution is to murder all 6 of their kids. And so later that night, before their kids went to bed, they gave their 4 youngest children ADHD pills in hopes that they would be poisoned and die overnight. Early next morning, Brandon Machine went to work and Sarah went into the kids' bedroom to check on them. She was shocked to see that all 4 kids had survived and none of them were affected by the pill. Now upset that the plan hadn't worked, she immediately called her husband Brandon to tell him that the plan had failed and began researching online for different ways to murder her kids. What she did next is unforgivable. Episode 2 coming tomorrow. These insane parents tried murdering their 6 kids multiple times. Part 2. Sorry for the wait. After their plan failing and the mom doing some research, she decided that drowning or strangulation would be the best way to get rid of their kids. Later that night, when Brandon got home, him and Sarah went into the kids' bedroom and strangled their 2 eldest, aged 13 and 14 at the time, with Brandon doing so with his bare hands. They then filled the bathtub up with water and attempted to drown their 4 youngest kids. Thankfully, this failed and all 4 kids survived. Now frustrated with their second failed attempt, they decided to take all 4 kids into a bedroom and phone the police. It is unclear why they decided to do this. Both half-brother and half-sister were sentenced to 35 years in prison and are expected to spend the rest of their lives there. Lastly, here's a quote from their mom. "I thought of every possible solution to this mess. Putting them into care, checking into the local nut house, or mass murder." Like what? This man is the real-life Pennywise. The story begins when John Wayne Gacy moved to Chicago and began working as a full-time clown. He went by Pogo the Clown and would perform for sick kids and at charity events. One morning on his day off, Gacy, aka Pogo the Clown, was driving around when he noticed a young man that seemed to be lost. The young man explained to Gacy that he was only passing through Chicago and that he was going to leave the next morning. Hearing this, Gacy offered to give the young man a tour of Chicago and even offered he spend the night at his place since the man had nowhere else to stay. The young man accepted. After allowing the young man to spend the night in his basement, Gacy woke up to the young man standing in his doorway holding a knife. Gacy, now scared for his life, leapt out of bed and charged at the young man. After wrestling the young man to the ground, Gacy was able to remove the knife from his hand and ended up puncturing the young man several times until he was left motionless. After murdering a man in what seemed to be self-defense, Gacy headed towards the kitchen to wash off the knife. But what he found in the kitchen changed him forever. This man is the real-life Pennywise, Part 2. Sorry for the long wait. When Gacy walked into the kitchen, he noticed an open carton of eggs and an unsliced slab of bacon. This is because the young man was not trying to hurt Gacy, but instead made breakfast as a way to say thank you for letting him spend the night, and went over to Gacy's room to wake him up. Upon realizing this, Gacy did not feel any remorse. Instead, he felt what he described as a thrill like no other. Now seeking his thrill for murder, Gacy would dress up as a clown and lure young kids into his house. There, he would handcuff them, making them defenseless to the torture. One fateful night, a pharmacy worker overheard Gacy trying to lure one of his victims. When the victim was reported missing the next morning, the pharmacist immediately pointed the cops to Gacy. Upon searching his house, they found so many body parts that it was hard to even identify the victims. Gacy was charged with 33 murders and sentenced to death. On May 10th of 1944, Gacy died of lethal injection. This 8-year-old boy is the youngest serial murderer in the world. It was a typical day in a small village in Bihar, India, when a middle-aged woman named Devi was playing with her 6-month-old daughter on the porch of an elementary school near her house when she remembered that she had left some food on the stove. She ran home, leaving her daughter alone for only a few minutes, but when she got back, her daughter was gone. Frantic, she began searching all around the school, but to no avail. This disappearance was all too familiar to the villagers, as this was the latest in a series of strange, unexplained disappearances of young children in the village. The villagers called the police, who arrived shortly after, not knowing they were about to make a discovery that was going to shock the entire world in the coming days. You are not ready for part 2. This 8-year-old boy is the youngest serial murderer in the world. Part 2. Sorry for the wait. The cops were shocked when the villagers pointed them to an 8-year-old boy claiming that he was the one behind all of the strange disappearances. The disturbed 8-year-old boy named Aramjit lived with his extremely poor family in a village called Mushari. One day, Aramjit's 1-year-old sister strangely disappeared. Oddly, the family initially did not mention the disappearance to their close friends or neighbors, but eventually people noticed and began asking questions. The family explained the disappearance as a sudden death from natural causes, but